Hello YouTube, this is Frugal and welcome back to part 2 of our first look, not really first impressions, at the Flight 1 B200 Super King Air. Now as I said, not really first impressions, spent quite a bit of time with this aircraft, but I'm not anywhere near an expert, so it feels wrong to call it a first impressions. Certainly not an expert tutorial, although we are following one, which is the excellent tutorial from Kurt Yoda Kalbfleisch, which is linked in the comments in the description section of this video. From the last video, we did all our power up, we've done our run up checks, we are good to go. Let me just talk you through the takeoff. Now I'm going to actually read out Kurt's amazing briefing for the takeoff. This will be a left seat IFR departure runway 11. Takeoff power will be set at 900 foot-pounds of torque. Flaps will be set to approach. VR is 96 knots and VYSC will be 121. That is our minimum safe climb speed. Any malfunctions affecting the safety of the flight at or below 96 knots we will reject, and above 96 knots we will continue. If it's an engine failure, we'll identify the affected engine via the dead foot and verify with the gauges, then feather the affected engine. We're going to climb then to our minimum safe altitude of 5,000 feet, and through 1,000 feet, refer to the checklist and return to Sitka on runway 11. Takeoff briefing completed. Now, takeoff in this is a little bit interesting, to say the least. It's going to be interesting here as well. Since we recorded part 1, the weather has come in. So we're going to have to be keeping an eye on the icing conditions. This aircraft does model icing. You will see ice build up on the wings. It does affect the flight dynamics of the aircraft as well. But other than that, takeoff. We want to watch the ITT. Red line is 830. We want to keep it way south of 790 if we possibly can. Now what we're going to do, actually, let me make sure I got my flight director all set up here for our climb. Takeoff, go around. There it is. What we're going to do is accelerate to 96 knots, then pull the nose up to a commanded pitch of 8 degrees, as you can see from the flight director there, and maintain 121 knots or faster for our climb. At 400 feet above field level, we're going to make a climbing turn to a heading of 223, and once we are on that heading, we'll raise our flaps. Now, you'll remember in the last video, we did some rather confusing stuff down here with the PFD, in that we set in BKA as our first waypoint, and we also set in the OBS mode and a course of 170. What that means is this cyan arrow is actually pointing here to BKA. That's where we're supposed to be heading to. Because we're in OBS mode, the magenta arrow is saying basically our course. We're trying to fly on the 350 radial to BKA, so we've set a course of 170. We're going to intercept that course and then fly along that course to BKA. So ultimately the two arrows will be pointing at the same place, but right now they're performing different functions. One is an omni bearing selector, the other is a GPS pointer. Now there are a few things we need to check before takeoff and final items. We will do these on the runway. So let me just get all situated here. Okay, first thing we're going to do before we even join the runway is going to turn the strobes on. We're going to turn the landing lights on. Then we will go and line up and finish our pre-flight or pre-takeoff checks. So increasing the power, you'll remember from the first video, it only takes a little bit, say 400 foot-pounds of torque down here to start moving. The aircraft will want to pick up speed very, very quickly. So as soon as we have a good rate of momentum, we're going to come off the throttles. Sorry, power levers. Bear in mind there is a significant lag from these big Black Hawk modified engines as well, which poses some challenges in terms of managing your engine power. Alright, here we are lined up. So the first thing that we're going to do is set our heading to runway heading. So feet on the brakes at this point. Whoops, a bit of a wobble. Click on that. That moves the cyan bracket to the top there, so we are tracking runway heading. So we're going to fly runway heading initially. Bleed air valves at this point should be open. Well, we don't have any warning lights, and those two switches are up, so they are open. Our annunciator lights are all extinguished or have been considered. Our transponder has been checked. Ice protection, we're going to set that in a second, and engine auto ignition now needs to be on. So there's the engine auto ignition. We're going to turn that on. If you're used to flying an NG, and I know many of you are, think of that as continuous on the engine mode. Okay, ice protection. There are a crazy number, in fact 15 switches to deal with ice protection in this aircraft. We can set some of them up now, even though we don't have icing conditions. It minimizes the workload when we do encounter ice. So what I'm going to do is move the camera down here. Here are our switches that deal with ice. The ones that we can turn on initially, fuel vents, left and right, we'll turn those both on. Prop heat to auto. Windshield anti-ice, we will turn that on to normal. Pitot heat left and right, we'll turn both of those on. Stall warning heat, we'll turn that on. And left and right engine auto ignition. Well, we've already turned those on. I don't think we need to turn on the engine anti-ice. Just checking Kurt's notes here. Nope, I think we're good. What he does say though is that having switched those on, if we do encounter icing, the only things that we really need to worry about once we encounter icing is turning on the engine anti-ice. And if there is any accumulation on the wings, which we can see by looking out the window, the surface de-ice button right there. So let's check everything now on the PFD. Should be seeing normal takeoff annunciations, which we do. GPS position is valid. We have no warnings there. Our barometric pressure is set on both the standby and the main PFD. I think at this point we're good to go. Turn the page. Oh, no we're not. We have not set our timer. There is a timer built into this. We'll bring it up now. We'll click on start. We'll do that in 1 second. Now what we're going to do is advance the engine, the power levers, until the auto feather lights come on. Then we're going to push them a little bit further. Okay, that will pretty much set our roll power. On the takeoff roll, we want to see the auto feather lights go out. We want to see the ignition on these two lights also go out. And then we'll cross-check everything we're seeing on the PFD. We do need to manage the aircraft a little bit carefully on our takeoff roll. If we advance the levers asymmetrically, we'll get a wobble, which can be very, very nasty. But basically, what we're monitoring on this takeoff roll is not to exceed 790 degrees Celsius on the ITT up here, not to exceed 2230 pounds of torque here on the engines, and we should be good to go. Once we get up to about 400 feet, we're going to turn on the autopilot and the yaw damper, and then set heading mode to turn to a heading of 223 degrees, and enable pitch mode on the autopilot by pressing that VS button twice. So without further ado, let's hit enter and start the timer. That's now started. We'll get rid of the timer display, recenter my view a little bit, just look down here, holding the brakes on my feet now, advancing both power levers at the same time until the auto feather lights come on. There's one, there's two, a little bit further, release the brakes, recenter our view, hold a straight line. Watching the ITT there, it's climbing a little bit. Watching the RPM as well, it's a little bit high on the left engine. Just bringing back the left power lever a touch there. 96 knots rotate. Up to 8 degrees of pitch, we have positive rate now, so gear up. Waiting now for 400 feet. Remember our best rate of climb is 121. Sorry, our engine out or safest climb is 121. There's our 400, so autopilot on at this point. Vertical speed once, twice, that's pitch hold, and we will now go into heading hold and select our new heading of 223. So the way we're going to do that is very, very simple. We're going to look down here, bring up the auto flight control, and just dial up 223. Like so. Now once we roll wings level at the end of this turn, that's when we will in fact bring up the flaps. Let's change the range, by the way. I thought I'd already done that, I hadn't. So we're going to change the range here up to 20 miles. There we are. We'll get rid of that display, and we'll get rid of that display. So basically we're flying on this heading here to intercept the course that we want to be on. Watching the speed here. Wings rolling level, so flaps up. And as we manage our climb now, we will set our climb power and everything as it should be, which is going to be to bring the propellers back to 1800 RPM. Now, let's see if we can do this. In fact, while we're thinking about that, let's turn the taxi light off. We don't need that anymore. So let's bring these props back to 1800 RPM. Now at this point we could assume ATC has contacted us and cleared us to climb a lot higher. We're going to be cleared straight up to 22,000, so let's go ahead and dial that in as well. There's 22,000 dialed in now. props back. And we're going to try to set, after we got the props here, we will synchronize them manually. You notice this moving diamond here, that's showing us the prop that we need to reduce to match the other one. So we'll try to synchronize these as good as we can manually. It's not very easy to do. It takes a little patience. That's pretty good. So auto feather now, we will turn that off. Prop sync on. Good. And we will set 91.3% N1 on both engines, 91.3 to 91.8, which is climb power. Now we're getting pretty close to the course we want to be on, so at this point we will engage nav mode. And we're going to change our rate of climb now to 1800 feet per minute. There. It's going to let us pick up a bit of speed. A little bit too much power on that right engine. You can see the torques turn red there. Bringing it back now on 91.3 to 91.8. And we're going to be established on course, which is the 350 or 170 radial to BKA, Bravo Kilo Alpha. Once we are on course, we'll disable OBS mode. You notice the map looks a little bit strange right now. It does not have our flight plan in here. That's because we're in OBS mode. Look out the window, no ice yet. Now as we climb, we will lose power. And also as we climb, the ITT could climb because the air thins out and it does less of a good job of cooling our engines. We need to keep an eye on both the power, to keep it at the optimum range, and the ITT to make sure we don't overheat anything and start melting. Alright, here we are on course, disable OBS mode. Back comes our flight plan, and we are on our way. Simple as that. 10,000 feet, we'll turn the landing lights off. And all we're concerned about at this point now is just managing the climb, so making sure our power stays in the optimum position. So above 91.3, you can see it's dropped a little already. So just moving the power levers forward now. That's a lot better. Didn't fly through any clouds yet, so there shouldn't be any ice buildup. Looks like we're going to have a fairly safe departure from Sitka, flying above the thick cloud layer and actually punching a hole through it on that climb out, which is kind of handy. Ice is deadly in this aircraft. There's 10,000 feet, landing lights off. What we can also check at this point is make sure the pressurization is working, so we can look at the cabin climb gauge to see that the altitude is increasing down there. That will be down here. It should be about 600 feet per minute. There it is. 600 feet per minute. It's climbing perfectly. Turning now, narrowly missing those clouds and the potential for nasty ice. Still keeping an eye on that leading edge of the wing though. Can't tell if that's a reflection. I think it is just reflection. Yeah, it is. And again, look at the engines. Look at the power on those engines. They've dropped already from 91.3 to 90.9. ITT is climbing as well a little bit. I push these power levers forward, try to get back up to 91.3. Trying to keep them in sync, although with two power levers as I have here, it's a little tricky at times. .8 is our limit, so at 91.7 on that left engine, we're just about on the limit. Going to move the right power lever forward a little bit, trying to match the left. Just the tiniest fraction of an amount. There we are. Notice the ITT is climbing again. The air is getting thinner. It's not doing such a good job of cooling these engines. flying at Alaska, which means our transition level is 18,000 feet. So we're looking at the altimeter here at 14,500. Once we hit 18,000, we're going to set standard. And then cross-check it over here as well. Those clouds came in very, very quickly. What I'm going to show you, when we get up to 22,000 feet, we're going to set the aircraft for a cruise. And that's actually pretty tricky. You need to refer to a bunch of paper tables that are in the PDF manual that comes with the aircraft to set the appropriate power and manage it all correctly. And it can take a little bit of time and patience to do it. Okay, moving these two power levers now forward once again. 91.3, please. .9 on the left engine, pulling it back. 91.8 is the absolute limit for us. Otherwise we will push the torque into the red. $17,500 feet now. So let's set standard now. 29902, 29902. Wind, we have a tailwind now at 32 knots. That's not helpful. ITT is climbing, 682, pushing both power levers slightly forward again. Gonna keep on advancing those probably all the way up. If we were cruising at the altitude that Kurt set out in his tutorial at 26,000 feet, by the time we get there, the power levers would actually be firewalled, trying to hold the appropriate amount of climb power. You can see there on the G1000, pretty neat device. It's already showing us top of climb indicator, which is very helpful. .20,000 feet, power dropping once again. There's our altitude alerter. Now what we're going to do here is let the aircraft settle and accelerate. Make sure this levels off appropriately. We need to keep an eye on the speed and make sure we don't overspeed. Normally you would not adjust anything at this point. We're just going to let the aircraft settle and accelerate, but if it starts to get close to overspeeding, then we'll pull back on the power. Once it's settled, then we can actually set the appropriate positions on the prop levers as well as the power levers. The way we do that, we're going to have a 1700 RPM cruise. So looking down here at the PFD, we have two numbers that are very important down here, outside air temperature and ISA. So you look in the charts that are in the back of the manual. So we're looking for an ISA around about 0. We have one that's pretty much 0. And outside air temperature of -21. So at -21, at 22,000 feet, we can see that we want our torque to be 2,230. at 1700 RPM, which is giving us a fuel flow per engine of 371 pounds of fuel per hour. So that's what we're going to dial up. Now over here you can see there's our fuel flow gauges, currently running at 386 pounds of fuel per hour, and our torques are pretty high. They could stand to go a little bit higher, to be honest. Just letting the speed settle, stabilize. There is our overspeed dial, or overspeed warning, I should say. Speed increasing, but it looks like it's slowing down on the increasing now. So what we're going to do is pull the props back together to 1700 RPM. Quite a considerable movement of those prop levers to do this. Trying to follow the diamond and the arrows there to keep them somewhat in sync. If they get too out of sync, disable the prop sync and resync them manually before turning prop sync back on. Alright, there we are at 1700. Now it was saying we want to set fuel flow to be around 371 pounds of fuel per hour. So we can move these power levers forward at this point. Oh, a bit too much. You can tell we have red lights up. Just bringing the power back now. Alright, a little bit under, but that's good. I think we'll leave it right there. This is our ideal cruise. And what we could also do here, normally you'd figure out the weight of the aircraft yourself, but like I said, I'm no expert. We're currently looking to stabilize around about 212, 213. If you look at the actual charts that you have in the manual, that puts us around about just under 11,000 pounds of fuel, around about 11,000 pounds of fuel. So we can figure out our weight that way, but normally you'd figure it out by hand. Now from here on in, we can settle in for a nice cruise. Or can we? Actually we can't. Kurt's tutorial has us using the PFD now, sorry, the G1000 now, to set a diversion in. So we're going to divert down to Juliana. We're pretending to be at Medflight and we got a call saying we need to go to Juliana, and that's just fine. Before we mess with that though, we'll take a look at these wings. Make sure there's no ice there. Another way, of course, in the simulators to look at the wings is actually to just pop outside. And everything is looking every bit as gorgeous as it did on the ground. So as always with my video series, this will be the end of part 2. In part 3 we will actually set that diversion into the G1000 down to Juliana and start our descent into Juliana, following very much the same principles that we did on this, so using OBS mode and balancing OBS mode with heading select to get on course. Once we actually get closer to Juliana, we're actually going to disable the GPS and just fly everything on the radios, which is very tricky and very cool. Thank you for watching. As always, my name is Frugal, and I will see you guys next time.